When I finished college a few months back, like so many millennials, I had a wee crisis of finances and decided to move back home for a few months, saving up money and all that, you know. Now, my parents live in a small town. Not quite rural, there's at least 3 churches, but nearly everyone knows everyone, or at least everyone knows everyone's people. New people do move in fairly often, but they either settle into a church and get some people real quick, or they just move on again. Crawdaddy did not move on again. He didn't get no people either. He just kinda stayed there. Let me go back a bit. When I decided to head back home, I didn't yet have a job lined up. There was this little coffee joint in town though. Pretty good for a non-chain in the deep south actually. The owner, she went to church with my parents. I'd helped her out at the shop a few times, filling shifts on the register and like. She was always short-staffed, so of course, Hanners was my first call. Sure enough, she gave me a job on the spot. Now here's the thing about working register in a coffee shop. You meet some weird, very creepy people, and usually when it comes down to it, they're just awkward. You get mouth breathers and people who don't make eye contact normally, and those who lean too far in over the counter and try to touch your hair. Mostly people that keep asking if you got a boyfriend, pretty little thing like you. Maybe a few ill intentions, but mostly just a lack of social skills. I can sympathize with those kinds of people. I mean, I'm awkward too sometimes. Actually, a lot of the time. So I sorta just deal with it. Brisk smile, step back from the register, gotta go check something in the back. If this was any one of those incidents, I'd post it over on Creepy Encounters instead. As I settled in over my first week as an official employee, I got a lot of people asking if I was new. Obviously, fam, obviously, or you wouldn't even be asking in the first place. Of course, they really just wanted to know who my people were and where I fit in. That's how these kind of small towns work. So I'd tell them, be all friendly, and after they left, I'd ask my coworkers, only 2 or 3 of us at a time, who exactly they were. One evening, a week or 2, or maybe even 3 by this point, this guy comes in about 20 minutes before closing. Immediately an awkward vibe. He starts in with the usual though. You're new. Yes, my man, you want to order? I've got floors to mop. Of course, I was being more polite out loud, though. Can I get, a large coffee? I'm tired, you know. I work in the kitchen just down the road. At Crawdaddy's? So I grab his coffee and ask if he's got an account with us. A lot of regulars do. Oh, no. I ain't putting my name in no sort of computer. They get you that way, you know. Okay then, buddy. Okay. He never did tell me his real name, by the way. We only found out from the arrest record way down the line. So he leaves, and I ask my coworker what Crawdaddy's deal is. He doesn't know. The man's got no church, no family, nobody really knows. Just comes in after closing the kitchen down and grabs a coffee. Bit odd though for someone with no kin. He'd been around for at least a year. Still, not my problem though. A few weeks, months go by. I start getting more and more closing shifts. I'm pretty nocturnal anyway. I start seeing Crawdaddy more and more though. Used to be he only came in once a month or so. Then it was every couple of weeks. Then once a week. He got more awkward too. Most people kinda pick up the hints and sorta know to drop it. Crawdaddy starts asking me if I'll come to his table and start putting in cream and sugar in his drink for him. He starts asking me more and more about myself. Do I like the job? How's Hanners as a boss? Where did I go to school? What part of town do I live in? Would I want to come waitress down at Crawdaddy's? I shut all that down real quick though. Finally it hit the point where he started asking me every night when I get off though. Stupid question honestly. It's not like he doesn't know when we close. But still, it was making me uncomfortable. I'm not exactly fixing to call the cops on a guy just because he's bad at reading social cues though. So instead I worked out a thing with my coworkers, where if they saw Crawdaddy coming, I'd buck out to the back and putter around till he was gone. This worked for a grand total of about 3 days. Then, As I'm chilling in the back, I hear him ask my coworker Asa if he's alone that night. None of us ever work alone. There's always at least two. Well, nah, I'm sure she's around somewhere. Crawdaddy ambles over the counter to put cream and sugar in his coffee, and stays. I'm waiting for Asa to come give the all clear, but it never comes. The minutes tick by and finally Asa tells him we're closing. But where is she? Asa says he doesn't know. He's gotta close. But I want to see her. Asa gives him a sorry man and tells him to get. He finally leaves after a while. Neither of us were too sure what to think of that. I decided to head home and call Hanners in the morning. Sure, it wouldn't be the first time she's had to tell a customer to back off. When I do call her, she asks me if I want to switch to afternoon shifts for a while. Life goes back to normal after I do. Afternoon is fine, busier, but still pretty good. Then a week or two later, Ivy's girlfriend dumps her. She has a bit of a mental break, and I end up pulling a double through closing. Sure enough, in rolls Crawdaddy, with me and no time to hide. Oh, you're back. You're still working here. Yeah, pal, just move shifts around to avoid you. What's up, large coffee? Are you not working nights anymore? You should work nights, you know. I can only come in on nights. I tell him it's all a bit flexible. Never really know when I'm working. Sorry about all that. No, that's not right. I know Hanners gives you your schedule a week ahead of time. You told me that. You told me lots of things. You should, give me your schedule, so I know. Asa came back from wherever he inconveniently was, and I ran to the back. I stayed there until suddenly Hanners popped in, which is weird. She's got kids. She doesn't work nights. She tells me to get on home and she'll call me after close. Turns out that after I locked myself in the back, Crawdaddy kept pestering them for my schedule. They didn't want to call the cops either, so Hanners came in to tell Crawdaddy to back off. When she arrived, he was halfway over the counter, trying to grab the printed sheets under the register. Joke's on him, though. They're just recipes. She banned him from the store after that. Straight up told him if he showed up again in the next year, it'd be counted as trespassing. I was very grateful, but I also needed a bit of a break from all this. I asked her if I could take a bit of a holiday week after next. Head to the beach for a few days. Now, I'm pretty reliable, and we were in the calm before the busy season. Also, Hanners is a great boss, so of course she agreed with me. We set it so that I'm back on the nights for a few days, then a mid, then an open. I wanted the open shift so that I had a full day free to drive. She's nice enough to not make somebody close one night and then open the next day. Of course, we weren't sure that Crawdaddy wouldn't still try and show up, so we made sure I was closing with male co-workers as well. Every night we've got someone in that shop who open carries. 6 days. That's all. Day 1, sure enough, Crawdaddy comes walking down the street. Jason goes walking outside, holster on hip. Crawdaddy immediately turns himself around. Day 2, nothing. Day 3, nothing. Day 4, nothing as well. But, now, I've got to explain something about the way I drive. Now, everyone starts driving young in this town, and you sort of just learn to pay close attention to other cars. If you know how many cars are around you and how fast they're going, you know whether or not someone's in your blind spot, and if you've got time to switch lanes, whether or not you should do an overtake. It gets to the point where it's not even conscious, it's just sort of a thing that happens. I leave work on day 4 and start heading home. I pull out of the lot. There's a couple of cars on the road. Take my first turn. There's a few trucks and a beat-up white sedan. Second turn, now just 2 trucks. Third turn, lose a truck, the sedan, and gain a red sedan. Fourth turn, I overtake the red car in a black truck. I was getting more out of town now. Fewer streetlights. Another turn, both cars still with me. Another and the same. My next turn is onto this dark, windy road. No lights at all on it. It's bendy, but there's no offshoots. That black truck turns in behind me. The red sedan carries on past us. The speed limit's gone up. I hit the gas, check my phone, check my mirrors. The black truck is suddenly gone. There's nowhere it could have gone. There's no turn-offs. It didn't overtake. and I would see the lights through the trees even if it was way back. In that funny way your mind does, my brain flicked through all the options and decided they must have crashed. Out-of-state plates, they don't know the road, it's bumpy. I slam my brakes. Out of the corner of my eye, I see a flash of movement. I twist. This asshole had cut their lights and was sitting in my blind spot. I do like any reasonable person would and peeled out of there like the proverbial bat. The fucker was still behind me. No hands to call the cops, no time to think. I was already too close to home. My parents' driveway had no real security, and neither did the house. I wasn't about to risk all that. But they've got a back way. There's this nature reserve outside of town. It's all gated off, and you gotta get a pass if you want in. People who work there get them, and a few other people who live in houses that butt up to it. The gates are electric. You just drive up and they open and close behind you. I start building up speed. The truck matches me. It's too close. If I go in the gate, the truck's just gonna follow. So I build up more speed, drive past the entrance, and pull a handbrake turn. I get through the gate and I can see him stopping and turning. The gate was taking its sweet time closing, and the first road through the reserve is straight and wide. If the truck got through, there was nowhere to hide. Instead, I backed into a lay-by right inside the gate, just in time. The truck came roaring up. At first, I thought it was just gonna smash through, but the brakes squealed and it stopped. And it sat there. My heart was beating 1,000,000 miles an hour. We were 20 minutes from town. Cops weren't gonna get here soon. I call my brother instead. He grabs a gun and jumps in his truck and starts heading around the outside. The black truck just sat there sitting. 1 minute, 2 minutes, 3 minutes. Then there's Paul's truck. Just like that, the black truck jumps into action and peels off right away. Paul comes through the gate and we call the cops. He managed to get the digits off the plate, and I remembered the state. 911, we explain. They put us through to the sheriff. Hey, you're the Hayward kids, aren't you? You've been having trouble with that guy at the coffee shop, haven't you, miss? Well, let's just check these plates then, because... Wait a second. We wait. Well, it looks like those might have been fake plates. Listen, y'all, we'll keep an eye out, but it was probably just some poacher trying to get onto the grounds. Y'all get to bed, and I'll send somebody around for a statement tomorrow. I was pretty sure it wasn't, but I wasn't raised to argue with a cop, especially when trying his best to make me feel better. The next day is my mid-shift. Day 5, and I'm desperate for the beach. Cops take my statement, and I'm sure I rambled on about how ready I was for that holiday. Day 6, I wake up to my alarm and a text from Hanners. She's already up with the kids, and since she's up, she felt like working. She told me she had it covered and to just get on the road. I was not looking to look a gift horse in the mouth, so I got on my way. I'm gone for 6 days as planned, when my mom calls. My sister a few states over is having a rough time and needs help with the baby. Mom already called Hanners, small town, and she was cool, so I could just go help my sister. I was gone 2 more weeks. I get back to town and there's a big weight off my chest. I'd probably just been overreacting to the whole thing anyways, right? Some people are just awkward, and it looked like Crawdaddy got the message. He didn't show up anyhow. Weeks go on and we get some new employees. We throw a party, and as it happens, we start talking about our most obnoxious customers. Y'all know Mocha Frappe lady? Well, and you know that guy who gets a caramel macchiato but wants us to say a cappuccino? So of course I jump in with, God, y'all remember Crawdaddy? Silence. You could cut the air with a knife. But no one was looking at me. Everyone was looking at Hanners. I need to tell you something. Let's go outside. Apparently, the day that I left for the beach that I was meant to open, the police had caught Crawdaddy breaking into the shop with a knife, duct tape, and a phone full of pictures of me leaving work. A black truck with false plates was parked out back. The state pressed felony charges, and my family made sure I was out of town until everyone knew he wasn't getting bail. I don't know how long he was locked up for, and honestly, I don't want to. I live pretty far away now anyways. This is going to take a while to explain everything, so try and stay with me. It all comes around. My very first car was a dark green 2000 Volkswagen Jetta. It was the most basic of basics when it came to cars. No options whatsoever except for an automatic transmission. It was $300. Slow, dumpy, no right headlight, drove straight with the steering wheel practically sideways. Let out a cloud of white smoke when it started, too. Every stereotype of a poor high schooler's car you can think of. My car was no exception. Despite it being a piece of German crap, I loved that car. I drove it every chance I had. I don't think a day went by when I didn't drive it. Named it Thunder Bunny, too. She was my baby. My beautiful green baby. But Volkswagens from that generation, Jettas especially, had a pretty bad flaw in the automatic transmission. I'm not sure exactly what causes it, but essentially the transmissions gradually get worse and worse until the car can no longer shift into third gear. There's not really a thing you can do from there. So a couple of weeks after Halloween 2019, I was going around 30 miles per hour when the engine suddenly roared and the car wouldn't speed up. I feared the worst, and my fears were justified. My dad, a mechanic, didn't even have hope for my baby. She was gone already. And so, much to my dismay, I started looking for a new car. It only took about a month for us to find her. A dark green 1999 Volkswagen Jetta. Exactly like my old car, but everything. She was faster, had heated leather seats, auto windows, auto sunroof, everything. All except for an automatic transmission. I knew how to drive manual anyway though, so it was pretty much perfect. I had a new baby now, from the crackhead neighbor girl to Scarlett Johansson, at least in my eyes. I loved that car even more. I named it Little Boy, and I was very happy. Okay, I'm about to get to the story, but I have a few more quick things to explain. You can skip this if you want. It's important to understand how the car works, but it's not vital to the story itself. First is for people that want to know but might not. When you have a manual car, you cannot leave it in gear and take your foot off the clutch. If you do, the car will stall, which is bad. So if you do leave your car in gear, you need to turn the engine off before taking your foot off the clutch. If you don't want to turn the car off or have it turn itself off, you need to pull the handbrake or it will roll away. Guess what the only really broken thing on my car was at the point this story takes place? If you guessed the handbrake, you're absolutely right. And that was the second thing. No handbrake. Okay, now on to the story. I started working as a pizza delivery driver in a smaller growing town in Michigan. It was good money, but every once in a while I delivered to an incredibly sketchy place. I've had a few shotguns pulled on me in my day. One night about 2 months ago, I was delivering on a Friday. Usually Fridays are very busy, but this day was a little bit slow. So when a delivery came in at 8:30, half an hour before we closed, I jumped right on it. I realized it was 7.1 miles away, so all of the closing jobs would be done by the time I got back. I would have been able to leave immediately. It was way out of town in a wood-surrounded neighborhood. But again, no work when I got back to the store? Seemed like a good deal for me, and I'm all about those sorts of deals. And so I climbed into my car and went to drive 7.1 miles away. As I pulled up to the house, I began to get a bad feeling though. The house was in a small trailer park type neighborhood right next to a lake. The kind that the houses are all a good distance apart, with likely a drug problem, and it was completely dark. No lights inside, no one inside. There was a single car in the driveway, and an open window on the side of the house. I pulled in behind the car in the driveway and sat there for a moment. Something was off. By the house being completely dark, I mean there wasn't even so much as a nightlight that I could see. Usually when I deliver to a dark house, there's at least some light on upstairs or something that would signal someone being awake waiting for a pizza. But this house seemed completely dead. Nevertheless, I put the car in gear, turned off the engine, grabbed the small, cheapest pizza we had, and got out. Without my headlights on, there was nothing. I could barely see the house. The only light was the dim moon. I walked onto the porch and past the big open window to the front door. As I reached it, I saw it. The door was slightly cracked open, just enough for me to see into the void of the house. Thinking of every single horror movie I've ever seen in my life, I said aloud, "Fuck that," and hurried back to my car. I'm a tall, well-built looking guy, but despite my wide shoulders and baggy hoodie, I'm actually quite a frail thing. I could hardly fight off a small dog. I got into my car and turned on the engine. My headlights illuminated the house, and almost simultaneously, the living room light behind the big open window lit up. A single guy looked out and walked out the front door. I cussed to myself and weighed the options. If I went up to that door, I could die. If I noped out of there, though, I would 110% be fired. That meant no new car parts, no gas money, no cute dates with my girl, just sitting at home doing virtual schoolwork. It was a stupid choice, I know, but I grabbed the pizza and opened my door. Making a choice I'm damn glad I made. I took the car out of gear and climbed out, mostly so my engine would still be running so that if I needed, I could run back and immediately take off. I walked up to the door where the man had opened it the rest of the way. As I got closer, I got a better look at him. I'm not one to judge a person based on their physical appearance, but the guy's head was cleanly shaven and covered in tattoos. He was wearing a pair of gray jeans and a white tank top. He had a scowl on his face too and was staring me dead in the eyes. I looked past him for a moment into the house, which I saw now was completely empty. As I got close enough that I started opening the pizza bag, he started to reach around his waist. I stopped. He was staring at me with the most evil grin I had ever seen. I knew in that moment I was about to die. I had always heard your life seems to flash before your eyes. I thought about my girl, that she wouldn't know what had happened. My work would stop delivering upon my disappearance, assuming that my body wasn't ever found. My dad would regret telling me he was happy for me landing this job. God save thee. That's when I heard it, though. The distinct sound of gravel under my tires. My only pathetically small chance of escape was now rolling away. I didn't even look back at the car to know that. I just stared at the man and was about to say "fuck you" when he looked back to my car. I heard the sound of the car rolling, but from the sound of it, it was getting closer. The guy's eyes went from the driveway to behind me. Finally, I looked over my shoulder. The car had rolled backwards and come to a smooth stop near the mailbox of the house. I looked back at the guy who now had a nervous look. He looked back at me, scowled again, and took his hand from around his waist. He reached into his front pocket and took out $12 and handed it to me. I gave him the pizza and watched him slam the door shut. I ran back to my car and practically tore the door off the hinges trying to get in. I looked back at the house. A man was standing in front of the window staring out at me. You better believe I nearly spun the tires on my way out of there. I kept glancing at my mirrors until I started driving under streetlights. It was easily the scariest moment I've ever had. As soon as I got back to the store, I told my boss about it, and she called the police. We never heard anything about it. I assumed they went to the house and only found a small cheese pizza. After that, I started carrying a knife on me at all times, and my boss is considering getting trackers for our pizza bags. Only recently, I realized this is sort of a butterfly effect. I thought it was the worst thing ever that my transmission went out, and I cursed Volkswagen for designing such a terrible automatic transmission. But if that transmission was still working, then I would have still had that car when this happened. I would have put that car in park and it would have sat there, while whatever would have happened to me would have happened. I have zero doubts in my mind that that man was planning to murder me. So shitty German engineering ended up saving me from getting murdered. I'm mostly a lurker on here, but have considered sharing my story several times. I was hesitant because absolutely no one knows about this. Not my family, nor my friends. I've held on to this for about 10 years now, and I figured now is about the right time to let it out. Plus, I think there are some valuable lessons that can be learned from my experience. So, here we go. Caution, long story ahead. For reference, I'm a 27-year-old female, and this story takes place about 10 years ago when I was 17. I had just started university and was excited about having a fresh new start. I'd always been a nerdy outcast in high school. Never had a boyfriend before, never even been on a date, so I was naive and optimistic about boys. My introverted and awkward personality hadn't magically changed since entering university though, so safe to say I didn't meet any interesting guys at school. One late night I was in my room working on an assignment on my laptop when I received a request on MSN Messenger. The email address was a boy's name and some random numbers. The name was clearly ethnic and likely someone of the same origin as me. Intrigued, I accepted. For the sake of the story, we'll call this boy Ken. We got to chatting, and I asked him how he'd even gotten my email address in the first place. He immediately dodged the question. I let it go, though, not thinking too much of it. You gotta remember, this is from a time when it was normal to accept anyone and everyone as a friend on Facebook and other similar social media platforms. As Ken and I continued to talk, I learned that he lived in my city, and apparently he wasn't that much older than me. As I'd guessed, our roots were in fact in the same country. Let's call it Motherland. I asked him why he didn't have a picture of himself on his display, and this prompted him to suggest that we turn on our webcams because he wanted to see me too. I declined, but he insisted. Somehow he convinced me, and we both switched on our cameras. I was pleasantly surprised and somewhat relieved to see that Ken was really just a good-looking young guy, chatting to me from the comfort of his bedroom, seemingly very normal. Our MSN chats carried on for a couple of weeks. They developed into texts, and we even had a few phone calls, after I agreed to give him my phone number. I started to develop a bit of a crush on Ken. He'd asked me to go out with him a couple of times, but I was always pretty busy with school and our schedules just weren't lining up. Finally, though, we found one afternoon when we were both free and decided to schedule a lunch date. Ken had a car and had offered to pick me up from my university after I was done for the day. I was a little bit too dressed up for my C+ programming class, but just right for the lunch date we had planned at a local vegetarian restaurant. Somewhat stupidly, I did not tell any of my friends where I was going, or with whom I would be going either, because I was embarrassed about going on my very first date, at almost age 18, with someone who had randomly added me on MSN. I waited outside my building when a black car with heavily tinted windows pulled up beside me. The passenger side window rolled down, and sure enough, there was Ken, sitting in the driver's seat. I was happy to see that he was as cute in person as he was on webcam. However, I wasn't expecting the intense smell of weed that wafted out of the car. Not relevant, but it was a startling first impression. Admittedly, I was a bit taken aback and was concerned he might be driving while high. He unlocked the doors and motioned for me to get in, so I did without dispute. As I sat down in the passenger seat, he immediately placed his hand on my thigh. I nervously shifted my leg away a bit. "So, do you know where the restaurant is? I can guide you if you want." He smirked at me but didn't say anything, and just started driving. Okay, kinda weird. I thought maybe he was just nervous or awkward, both of which I could definitely sympathize with. I was about to try my hand at a little bit of small talk, which I'm generally no good at, when I noticed him heading towards the highway ramp. I started to worry, because the restaurant was not far away from my campus, and there was no reason for us to get on the highway. You don't need to take the highway there. The restaurant is really close by. I can guide you." I tried to keep my voice steady, but I could hear my own nervousness. Ken finally spoke, for the first time since I had gotten into the car. "I thought maybe we could just go to my place instead. We can play Need for Speed and I can make some lunch for you." I was 17, on my way to the house of a guy I'd just met for the first time, and I hadn't told anyone where I was going either. My mind was racing. I knew this was an utterly stupid thing to do. Despite the clear red flags waving in my face, though, I decided I didn't want to ruin our first date by rejecting his offer to make me lunch and play Need for Speed together. which I'd told him I liked a lot. So, like an idiot, I reluctantly agreed to avoid being rude. We made it to his house eventually. It was apparently his family's home and was situated in a sort of shady neighborhood. We stepped inside, and of course I noted that no one was home except us. It was sparsely furnished and looked unkempt, which struck me as pretty odd for a supposed family home. He informed me that his Xbox was in his bedroom. I hesitated in the doorway, but he sat at the foot of his bed in front of the TV and patted the empty space beside him for me to have a seat. There was literally nowhere else to sit in his room, so I cautiously took my place, keeping as much distance as I could between us. I started to relax as we began playing, and he made us PB&Js to munch on. I was about to laugh at myself for being overly paranoid when Ken did something really bizarre. He got up onto the bed and sat down directly behind me, his legs on either side of me, and tried to guide my hands on the controller. I started to ask him what he was doing, and as if this wasn't uncomfortable enough, his hands moved from the controller and slipped up under my shirt. That's when I really started to panic. I thought he was going to try to grope me, but instead he started squeezing and massaging my belly. I was more than a little chubby back then, freshman 15 and then some, so you can imagine what that might have been like. I dropped the controller in shock and stood up, fixing my shirt. I was at a complete loss for words. He did nothing but smirk at me and tell me he liked it. I felt disgusted and violated, though. I'd had enough. I lied and told him I had a group project to work on and needed to go. He asked where I lived so he could drop me home. Thankfully, I still had the common sense to not tell him, and I asked him to drop me back at school instead, where I would supposedly be meeting my classmates. He obliged. Well, after our very uncomfortable first date, I decided I did not want to talk to Ken anymore. I didn't block him on MSN or my phone, our only two methods of communication, but instead I just ghosted his messages and ignored all of his calls. Once, he messaged me on MSN around 11 p.m., asking me to come over and telling me he would send a cab to bring me over to his place. Thoroughly annoyed, I responded, "What do you take me for? Why do you even think I would want to do that?" He continued trying to get in touch with me for months, and then suddenly he just vanished. I figured now he'd finally gotten the point. Now, I wish the story ended here, but of course, it does not. I'd last heard from Ken in late February. He had stopped trying to contact me shortly after Valentine's Day. In April, 2 nuclear family members and I went on holiday to visit another relative, who we'll call Anne, who was living in the Caribbean at the time. Anne, who I love dearly, was and still is a bit of an eccentric. She considers herself very spiritual and is an active member of a large, well-known spiritual organization. She's deeply connected with Motherland, more than the rest of us are, and goes back for frequent visits as well. While we stayed with her in the Caribbean, she told us about her most recent spiritual trip, where she met a wealthy and well-connected local woman through the organization, who quickly became a very close friend. Let's call her Connie, short for con artist. During our visit, Annie introduced us to her virtually over Skype, because Connie lives in Motherland. We chatted with her a couple of times throughout our vacation and got to know her a little bit. Little did we know back then that Connie, who Anne had spontaneously met halfway across the world in Motherland, would soon wreak utter havoc on our lives. Now, that's a story that I'm just not and may never be ready to tell because of just how many lives were affected and the severity of the damage inflicted. What you do need to know is that she was an outright criminal and con artist who had been targeting our family from long before Anne had actually met her. Their meeting was no coincidence. Not only did she manage to steal over $100,000 from our family, but she took any peace of mind or sense of security we had ever had. When we finally caught on and confronted her, she insisted that we were mistaken, but disappeared into thin air once we forced her out of our lives. Now, at this point, you're probably wondering, what the hell has this got to do with my story about Ken? Well, get this. The situation with Connie lasted many months. The whole thing is a bit of a blur to me now, but we first spoke to her online in April, and I remember the whole ordeal lasting well into the fall. While she normally resided in Motherland, Annie had invited her to visit and stay with us where we presently live. That's when things took a turn for the worse. Some of the things I clearly remember and are important to the story were that 1. The whole time she was staying with us, she was trying to convince me to transfer schools to a very obscure school and program in the US. I don't even live there. She was getting very pushy about it as well. 2. She had asked me if I was a virgin and told me to save myself for my husband. During this time, I was so emotionally drained and stressed that I didn't really think of anything but the situation at hand. In fact, I had stopped socializing almost entirely, and had even started habitually skipping classes. I had lost contact with my high school friends, my university friends were too new to really care, and so my strange behavior and new destructive habits went unnoticed. Fast forward to one day, after Connie's final disappearance in the fall. I was at home with my dad when my cell phone rang. I looked at the caller ID, and it was a number I did not have saved. It was showing the contact information as whatever name the phone was registered under. My heart dropped to my stomach. My phone displayed a name. The first name was a man's name, and the last name was the same last name as Connie's. I started to panic and ran into my bedroom to answer the call. I had no idea what to expect. But when I picked up the phone, I was greeted by a very familiar voice. It was Ken. I honestly thought I was going to puke when I came to a sudden realization that he had been part of this whole sick plot from the very start. Of course, I don't have hard evidence to prove he was connected to Connie, but let me explain. The timing of his appearance and reappearance in my life, the last name, a fairly unique surname originating from the part of the motherland where Connie is from. I had never known Ken's last name until then, and the fact that he contacted me out of the blue. I had no idea why or how, but it was all just too bizarre to be a mere coincidence. Of course, I freaked out at Ken when he called me, and I told him that if he ever called me again, I would call the police. His response was just a weird, dry half laugh. Then, well, okay then, in the most creepy voice you can think of, and he hung up. I knew in my gut this was their last attempt to get back in touch and somehow slither their way back into our lives. Thankfully, I never heard from Ken again after that. A while after this all ended, I was having a conversation with a family member who was also closely involved in all this, about the whole ordeal. She told me she sensed something extremely wrong when Connie was pushing to have me sent off to the US to that obscure school. She had an unshakable feeling that Connie was involved in some sort of human trafficking scene, and that if I left, I would never be seen again. The horrifying pieces came together for me at that time. I was just too naive to have seen it before. The memories came flooding back to me when I heard that. How Ken had told me no sex, I promise, when he invited me over, and how Connie was constantly telling me to remain a virgin. As I said, I had never told a soul about Ken, nor the weird V-card conversation with Connie. I strongly believe that Ken had been some sort of player in this game, and was just there to keep me away from guys and prevent me from getting a boyfriend. For those who may be wondering, we never called the police on Connie or Ken, because technically nothing illegal happened at face value. It's very hard to explain. I'll also mention that I tried really hard to find Ken online many times after this all ended. I don't know why, I felt like I wanted to expose him or something. I was not able to find even a sliver of information on him, not by the name Ken, nor by the name on the caller ID. It was as if he just suddenly didn't even exist. I'm awful at remembering things, so I didn't remember the address he'd given me or where his house was exactly. I'm sorry if this story is a little convoluted or confusing. I'm trying to get my point across without giving out any specific names or too many details, which makes it a little bit challenging. I hope this can serve as a warning to young people, though, to never trust anyone who you don't thoroughly check on, especially those you meet online, and to be very aware and wary of people's intentions. Also, from this incident onward, I can no longer stomach a lot of those spiritual organizations. Never really liked the idea of them to begin with, but now I've experienced truly how they can attract both vulnerable people and also unsavory characters who are looking for those vulnerable to prey on. No judgment for those who are into that sort of thing, just definitely not for me. I would like to hear what you guys think about this, though. Do you think my suspicions are plausible? What do you make of it? What is up, guys? Blue Spooky here as always. Thank you guys so much for watching, especially if you made it this far to the end of the video. If you guys enjoyed the content of this video, please be sure to like, share, comment, and subscribe if you feel so inclined. If you do decide you like my content enough to subscribe, please be sure to hit the bell button right next to the subscribe button and turn notifications to all so you can be notified of every video I post in the future. If you don't feel like doing that though, I post a video nearly every day, so you can just come back every now and then and check up on what you missed. If you guys have any criticisms on what I can do better or any feedback on the stories in the video, please be sure to leave them in the comments below, as I always enjoy reading all the comments and I try to give them hearts and respond when I can. If you guys would like to reach me for any reason, or you would like to send in a story to be read, you can go ahead and take a look in the description below the video. You'll find a link to all of my social media, including my Facebook, Gmail, and Twitter accounts. Go ahead and send me a message on any of those, and I'll try to get back to you as soon as possible. If you do decide to send in a story, please be sure to include in the tagline what the name of the story is if it has one, what type of story it is if it has a theme, and how you would like to be credited in the description of the video the story appears in. Last but not least, I also run two other channels, Mr. Blue Skies and Darkest Hour, where I do true crime videos and dark documentaries respectively. If that kind of content sounds interesting to you, why not go ahead and check it out and see if it is for you. Aside from that though, guys, I think that's pretty much it for now, so thank you guys so much for watching, and I hope you guys have a great day.